Demonic presence at unsafe levels. Lockdown in effect.
There are many demons, but there's only one.
Electro Demon.
Quake was made in 1996 and it changed the shooter genre forever. It was extremely influential as it is the first fully 3D game. So that's 3D environments, 3D enemies, weapons, everything. It wasn't faux 3D like Wolfenstein or Duke Nukem, it's fully 3D. And all of this before the GPU accelerators were a thing. That's mighty impressive. Quake was developed by id Software, the legendary developer. The story in Quake is very simple, but it's not important at all. This is an old school shooter with the story presented to you via on-screen text at certain spots in the game. You kill demonic monsters and you need to collect 4 runes to gain access to the final boss. That's as much as you need to know. So how about the gameplay? Well, seeing this came out in 1996, you'd think this would be dated. I honestly never played Quake 1. I finished all Quake games and I did briefly play Quake 1 back in the day, but I had zero remembrance of it. So I jumped in expecting it to be archaic, but goddamn, I was pleasantly surprised. I'm a fan of retro shooters, and nowadays you have many boomer shooters like Ion Fury, Parodius, Dusk, etc. And they all pull their inspiration from old school games like Quake. I have to say, while I like modern old school shooters, they can't hold a candle to Quake. It's so fast-paced and simple, but simple in a good way. The movement is extremely fast when compared to modern games. Difficulty is brutal and its level design still stands the test of time. There are 2 stars of the show in Quake 1, weapons and enemies. Let's talk about the weapons. It's actually a small roster of guns compared to other games, but it's still well balanced. The only melee weapon in the game is the axe. It has a small damage output and it should be used as a last resort. The first weapon is the shotgun. It's actually quite underpowered, but as soon as you get your hands on the double-barrel shotgun, there really is no need to use the regular shotgun anymore. The double-barrel version does solid damage to all types of enemies and it's good all-rounder weapon. Then there's the nail gun, which is kinda like a machine gun, good for crowd control and it has a solid damage output. There's also the super nail gun, different version of the nail gun which has faster firing rate. Then there's the grenade launcher. I found this to be the most useful weapon in the game. It shoots out grenades and grenades bounce off the walls, making it perfect for tight corridors. Shame it uses the same ammo as the rocket launcher. The rocket launcher is also a good weapon that has the same damage output as the grenade launcher. And the final weapon is the Thunderbolt, a weapon that shoots out fucking lightning. Extremely powerful weapon, and it's my go-to weapon for dispatching shamblers. The enemy design is great too, a lot of variation. Small grunt type enemies, dog, lunge type monsters, and plenty more. The most common type of enemy is, I'd say, the ogre. This motherfucker has a chainsaw and also shoots out grenades. Kind of a bitch to deal with in the beginning. And one other iconic enemy, I'd say, is the fucking Shambler. Jesus Christ. And you'll be seeing this asshole throughout the whole game. This is a big white monster that claws you to death in 1 or 2 hits at close range. And if you get too far, he shoots out lightning that's extremely damaging. He's also quite a bullet sponge and takes a lot of shooting to bring this motherfucker down. And I also have to mention Devore, a spider-like creature that's also quite bullet spongy. It shoots out a purple homing ball at you, which, for the love of God, I was never able to avoid it. Nothing happens if you shoot it, and sometimes it does collide with a wall and explodes, but that's rare. Most of the time it ends up exploding in your face. Now for the environments. Quake was designed by many people, and it shows. A lot of levels have a different vibe. Generally, Quake has a gothic Lovecraftian feel to it, with medieval castles and gothic facilities. The level design is great, with switches and keys. It's old school, but it's well designed. I did get lost in some of the levels, but generally, most levels have a nice fluidity to them. Some levels have a maze-like feeling, but I guess that's what you get for different people designing levels. Majority of the levels were designed by the legendary John Romero. The difficulty is just right. It's definitely harder than new age boomer retro-inspired shooters. I finished the game on normal difficulty, and it was okay. I did die a fair amount of times, but the game has a save anywhere option, so it's manageable. The power-ups also play a big part in Quake's gameplay. Quad damage, shield, etc. When you use the quad damage, get ready for blood. It's such an amazing power-up. It amplifies your damage output by 4 times, it's just a rampage when you use it. Technically speaking, Quake is a dated game, but that's understandable for a game from 1996, but it's not unplayable by any stretch of the imagination. I played the DirectQ version of Quake that enables higher resolutions and generally a sharper image. This version is pretty great if you want to get into Quake. The soundtrack was composed by 9 Inch Nails and Trent Reznor. It's very ambiental and somehow fits the tone of the game, but I kinda prefer a metal soundtrack like Quake 2 had. It just gets me pumping more, but that's not to say this is bad, it's good. There's also multiplayer, but if you're into that, you should play Quake 3 Arena or UT. From start to finish, Quake took me about 4.5 hours to beat on the standard difficulty, and those were 4.5 hours very well spent. I suggest this to anyone that's a shooter fan. If I had to give a score to this game, I'd give it 9.4 out of 10.